Well, I guess this one was inevitable. I'm saying that a lot recently, aren't I? Yes, we're starting the new year off by once again delving into the wonderful world of celebrity cartoons. My freaking word, have there been too many of these. The trend actually started in the 1970s with everyone from the Harlem Globetrotters to Donnie and Marie to the Three Stooges getting a cartoon show. All of which I probably could have reviewed a long time ago, but it just seems they all blend in together as one. Things seemed to die out in the 80s, amazing enough. But then by the 90s, it all picked up again. That period we have touched on before, going after shows like John Candy running his own summer camp, Michael Jordan and Bo Jackson as super spies, and Roseanne Barr if she was Dennis the Menace. And yet, with all of those out there, it seems there's a consensus around the web as to just what the absolute worst of the bunch was.
Hammerman! Hammerman! Hammer! Whenever there's a crime, some crooks are gonna do time. They all better beware, cause the Hammerman will be there.
It's not getting any better from here, people. It can be hard for kids today to fathom just how transcendent MC Hammer was. By the early 1990s, there had been some hip-hop artists and groups that reached some mainstream appeal like Run DMC and Boyz II Men, but the man born as Stanley Burrell took it to a whole other level. Hammer made rap popular among the masses. There were kids of all races and colors singing "You Can't Touch This" on the playgrounds. Of course, his meteoric rise to fame ended up coming down just as hard, but that's for guys like Todd and the Shadows to cover anyway. Naturally, at the height of said popularity, Mr. Hammer just had to get his own animated series in 1991 where he plays a magical dancing trickster superhero looking out for the kids, right? I think I just blew 100 brain cells just saying that. This is the infamy known as Hammerman.
The shoes knew at once they had finally found their man. They hopped right on his feet and he became Hammerman, Hammerman, Hammer.
So after that incredibly overdone exposition dump of an intro, we get Hammer and a bunch of other live-action kids on an animated set as Hammer proceeds to reveal the entire plot of the forthcoming episode. Oh goody, so that means I don't have to watch it now, right? And then the actual first episode starts with this.
Not bad, Ludwig. But now, let me show you how we did it in my day.
I think I'm hurting Animat's very soul just from watching this myself. Good freaking night! It's like Trey and Matt watched this and immediately used it as the template to create Terrence and Phillip! And no, I'm not blaming Deke on this one, because I watched cartoons made by Jean and Andy's company as far back in the 80s, and at least most of those were fluid. I don't know exactly how Hammer lost most of his money, but it sure wasn't spending it on animating this thing.
No time for dancing, Gramps. We gotta move. The library's burning up.
Or maybe he just spent it on his own character. Because of course the Hammerman himself is the only one who comes off like he was animated halfway decent, both in movement and appearance.
Take a
would have laughed his ass off at this. So here seems to be the basic gist of the story. Hammer plays Stanley, who has a pair of magic dancing shoes that, when he dances with them on, allows him to bend and violate all laws of reality to his will. He was given them by this old guy, who I don't think was his grandpa, but was some former dancer himself. Yeah, anyway, he's the Yoda of this show. And then there's this teenage girl who's always stalking and trying to meet up with Hammerman because that's not creepy in any way, shape, or form. Yeah, I'll get more into her in a bit. Oh, and then there are the shoes. They can talk and will make you wish they didn't.
But I'm not sure you picked the right guy.
Yes, we did.
What do you mean we? I saw him first.
You lying loafer, I did. I'm gonna knot your laces.
Oh, I'm gonna tweak your tongue.
Oh, yeah?
You know, at least with Scrappy-Doo, we only had one annoying voice in the show. Stanley, in his civilian form, works or volunteers at this community center because we have to drive it home with a sledgehammer that Hammer's character is the biggest beacon of goodness in the projects here. Which is why, as Hammerman, he fights back against his neighborhood being destroyed by the evils of graffiti. Yes, just after we saw Hammer bring a water tower to life to save the burning library, we then switch to this friend of the girls who's becoming a delinquent painting graffiti everywhere, and then she gets influenced into doing so by this sewer urchin in cosplay whose name sounds like he was rejected from Captain Planet's Rogues Gallery.
That little graffiti sweetie is exactly what I, Defacely Marmeister, have been looking for.
And then he can make the graffiti come to life and attack the city. Okay, I am really trying to not keep making the joke about these shows being made by people on drugs, but it's very difficult when you're throwing all of this at me, especially since a show like this being made on illicit stuff would really be hypocritical. So that's the basic premise of the show. Hammerman not only uses his magic shoes to stop disasters, like a collapsing bridge that comes apart for no given reason, but to then rescue the kids from some evil force that tries to lure them into delinquency. Because he just has to be even more of a Boy Scout than Superman. I know nowadays the term Mary Sue or Gary Stew is so taboo, but this is so extreme, I doubt even Hammer and his own ego dreamed it up. This is like it was made by one of his biggest fans in junior high school making his own fan fiction. What really is a headbanger is almost every episode has some contrivance that causes Stanley to temporarily lose the shoes just to pad out more runtime so he can't up and resolve the conflict in less than 10 minutes. It's one thing I will actually give the show credit for, in that it never uses that plot device to try and prove Stanley can be a hero without his magic MacGuffin, only to have him use said powers in the end anyway, because that's what everyone still wants to see, right? I mean, why would we want the kids watching to learn something like you don't need superpowers to be good? That would imply that we think our audience is smart, which is why we have to portray all the kids in the show as stupid and annoying.
Yo, is Stanley around? I gotta see Stanley.
Showbiz, will you look at this?
Too busy, kiddo. Got big stuff going. Big stuff. I'm telling ya, I don't know where your lunch went.
You are the party guilty of consumption.
I didn't consumpt anything.
And yeah, that brings us to the most annoying and inexplicable part of the show, the teenage girl Jodie. She's mostly a whiny brat who complains all the time about not being noticed or appreciated, and thus is usually central to the plot resolution so she can learn some lesson from Stanley/Hammerman. And that's where her very existence breaks the show entirely. Her backstory is that she's an orphan in the care of the old man who spent much of their lives hunting down the person worthy of taking the shoes and the old man's mantle, who of course turned out to be Stanley. As a result, Stanley now lives with Jodie and the old man. And yet, Jodie doesn't know that Stanley is Hammerman. Of all the shows that use this trope, this one might be the actual worst, because so many others did have a good reason. Or at least had a reason. Lois Lane didn't live with Clark Kent. Well, at least not until they fell in love, got married, and she did in fact discover he was Superman. But hey, that was in the comics and not in most of the TV shows anyway. I said most of them. Teela did live in the same palace as Prince Adam, but he did a good enough job playing the lazy coward that you can get her believing he couldn't be He-Man. This is like if Gosselin didn't get that her adoptive father Drake Mallard was actually Darkwing Duck. It's almost like they were trying for this setting where the kid won't listen to her elders and thus needs a celebrity idol to help teach her right from wrong, because that's a great message to send. You almost wonder if Charles Barkley saw this and that drove him to make his famous I Am Not a Role Model commercial. Amazingly, there doesn't seem to be a lot of songs inundated into these episodes. The first one does have Can't Touch This, which is fine, but just about everything else for the series is background noise at best. And I honestly can't say if that's a good or bad thing. With all that, I don't think anyone is surprised that this only got one season. It seems up to 3 of the 13 episodes made have been lost, and of the ones that made it onto YouTube, half of them have a Polish dub imposed over the original dialogue. This thing probably would have disappeared forever if not for people like us bringing it back to life via the internet. Oh dear, are we actually the bad guys? Whatever, this was just a chore to get through. I get what its purpose was. MC Hammer really was a good guy who was probably told making a cartoon about himself could allow him to reach out to kids and teach them some good lessons. But when cartoons for PBS over the years have done that with better production quality and better characters, this being made for a commercial Saturday morning audience was just doomed to bomb. I wouldn't be surprised if its failure was one more reason Hammer gave up on his clean-cut image by 1993 and tried to redesign himself with the disaster album The Funky Headhunter. And while this wasn't the death knell for the celebrity cartoon, it at least looks like any future attempts put in more effort than before and led to the few we've had since be somewhat tolerable. Even if they made less sense. Really, how did they make a cartoon starring Mike Tyson solving mysteries and people actually liked it? See you next time on TV Trash.